Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about uh, mystery games, the genre, and what it means for a mystery game to be a mystery game, what makes it unique. And today I'm joined by a friend of mine, Apocalyptic Drew, part of Apocalyptic Gaming Crew. Say hello.
How's it going, guys?
And thing is that the main subject for today is going to be, uh, like I said, what makes a mystery game a mystery. And for me, that always means, instead of following a linear story, you know, you try and figure out what it is that you have to figure out to nail the culprit. For example, let's say you are playing LA Noir and you need to figure out who it was that killed someone. And in that game, like they had it to where you could read the facial expressions and everything, and also find evidence at crime scenes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to figure out who did what and like how you're going to catch them. And what this means is, that it had that level of detail so that, you could be able to like figure it out. Now, it's not a full mystery game. I mean, there was a mystery aspect to it, but it was more of a crime fighting, cop kind of thing going to it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as far as mystery aspects go, it didn't have as much as other games do, like such as Alan Wake or um, better yet, a better example of a good mystery game that followed the whole Law and Order kind of aspect to it, where you're investigating crimes going on, but it kept the mystery going because nobody, not even the ones committing some of the crimes, knew what was going on. Is Heavy Rain for PS3. Um, One of the biggest aspects of it was you play as the killer, you play as the father of the victim, you play as the reporter, and you play as the cops that are involved in the case. And you
Hello,
have no
librarians
idea
and
which
finally on
one
the
of them
Global
is the
Feature
real
Prize.
killer until
It's just
you
been
get
announced that
towards the end of the
Maggie McDonald,
game
Canadian
and the
teacher who
real
works
killer
at the remote
unveils
Arctic
themselves.
communities.
So
Everyone's very
even
excited.
though
We had
you're playing
Justin
through the
Trudeau.
eyes of the killer, that perspective is hidden from you.
Mm. Yeah, like that is definitely pretty good for mystery, but um, the game that I would like to see personally, like is a game where like I've already had an idea for a board game where what you do is you follow a like you choose a character and from there you try and get like suspicion points and different kinds of ways to try and deduct exactly what it was that happened, kind of like Clue, but better. Like Clue, you have to. It's basically all in your head. You have to ask people, okay, let me see what you have. I'll show you what I have, and you go back and forth and everything. And it depends on how cooperative people are. And there's no bad guy. Like there's no way to try and tell who it is that's the bad guy. Like I don't know if you ever played Werewolf, by the way.
The little tabletop drinking game or whatever.
Well, it was more of, like those cards that you would either be a peasant or a seer or the werewolf,
Mm-hmm.
and like there was even a version where, there was the werewolf and the warrior guy, like, or the huntsman, to where, if it was just the werewolf and the huntsman left, the huntsman wins. If it's the werewolf and a peasant left, the werewolf wins. If and then like there's all different kinds of ways to play it. Depending like you would think about okay, who did this guy vote for, and he's taken out now. Maybe the guy he voted for was the actual werewolf. That kind of
Mm-hmm.
aspect to it. Like that right there is like a pretty good way of looking at different kinds of mystery to me. And one of the ways that that was expanded upon was you could play politics while you're discussing who you're going to vote for. Now, imagine doing the same thing in a board game, where you're trying to figure out who it was that killed the murder victim. And that right there is, a pretty good ideal for me. Is that you could have different victims each time, and a board game set up to where you could get like suspicion points, and you have like different detectives with different abilities trying to figure out who it was that did it, and um, you can even have it to where the detectives themselves could be the suspects. I mean, this is just a theoretical thing I'm talking about here,
Hmm.
and like there is that, but then you get into the whole case of looking at VR. Like that right there, I think is an untapped area for what you can have in these games.
Well,
Like,
it's funny you mentioned VR with a mystery game. There is one that I own. I haven't played much into it because it does require the handset controllers for virtual reality controls. Whereas I don't have that yet, so I have to use mouse and keyboard or Xbox controller, and it's just
mm,
it's not as responsive in VR without those actual touch and reach controllers. Um, which now that those are down to $100, it won't be long. I'll
mm,
probably just say screw it and just go drop the money for them. But go ahead and get them for the Oculus Rift. But the Vanishing of Ethan Carter, I haven't played far into it, but it is just this really surrealistic, beautiful landscape. Some areas you can see like some aliasing when playing in VR, but other than that, some of it looks so surreal that you get so immersed with how realistic
mm.
the graphics are. I believe it's made with the Unreal 4 engine. So I mean, we've already seen some impressive stuff come from that engine alone, but
Mm.
actually utilizing it in virtual reality and seeing that landscape in VR is just an added bonus to how intense and immersive the game is. But like I said, I haven't played far into it because I want to play it solely in VR. I don't want to go through the non VR mode. Um, but it is an absolutely beautiful and stunning game. I'll be able to tell you. Hold on,
All right.
what
But
the engine was.
yeah, for me, whenever I'm dealing with something like a mystery game, like what I see is, for example, let me try and think. Uh, like in LA Noire, you're trying to find the murder suspect, and what I would like to see in a VR game is basically you looking around and like not having anything hotkeyed. Like for example, whenever you're in this game, if whenever you look at a particular surface that there's like some kind of readout saying, oh yeah, there's this like I don't know, um, how best to put this. That whenever you look at like for example, Batman Arkham Asylum, there we go. We can go to Batman and how he turns on his detective mode, and you can like see like different areas being highlighted. It does the work for you. And you basically walk up and like you have access to a supercomputer, everything gets processed, and you're able to extrapolate where someone is. I mean, that right there would be a bit much. Now, what I would like is a procedural game that lays different kinds of evidence throughout the scene, and depending on whatever detective you choose, like for example, you could choose Hercule Poirot. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a fictional like I don't know if he's a detective, but he's basically someone who would always investigate things and would always basically look for evidence and use the evidence to try and put together exactly what happened. He would use lots of witness accounts to do it as well. And then there's someone like Sherlock Holmes, who can, who basically notices a lot of things, but the flaws are what make these things great. Like for example, Sherlock Holmes, if he doesn't have all of the information, if let's say he has like a mistaken assumption about a person's like financial situation, for example, he
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to, properly like evaluate them. So he would have to have
And
all of the facts.
that was another issue that popped up with LA Noir. I remember playing it, is like some accusations you couldn't make because you weren't able to find a single clue. Now I get that in the aspect of, okay, if you're trying to pin something on somebody and you don't have the necessary evidence, I get saying that you can't accuse them. But when the evidence is there, but in order to get a confession out of them, you didn't say one thing to them when you did your initial interview with them. If you didn't say that initial thing and you found the evidence that would nail them to the cross, all of a sudden now you can't even say it because the game's like, well, you didn't 100% complete the interview, therefore you've messed up. Or if your intuition's just a slight bit off, based on your skill level in LA Noir, um, you may think that, okay, well, here, let me say this one thing, and I think I can drive them into giving me the answer. And instead of giving you one or two chances, like with most people it does, some of them, you mess up that initial chance, they stay silent, and there's no way you can interview them again. And from that point on, you can't arrest them because you cannot get any further evidence.
Mm,
And that was an issue I saw with it, is there was no way to go back and figure out a way to get them to talk again.
mm. Now, how many different, fictional detective type characters have you, dealt with before? Like, what kind of characters would you like to see? Do you think?
Well, I think one of the most interesting ones that I've seen was the murdered sole suspect character.
Mm,
I mean, you're a cop, you get killed, and you're investigating your death, and along the way, you investigate others. You're a ghost cop. um, uh, and it was really interesting and innovative how they did that. But
mm,
I mean, I don't. Mystery games are fun, and I enjoy them, but I believe that adding a mystery aspect to any game is actually better. Um, for instance, excuse me. For instance, where in such games such as Fallout 4, the whole game, yeah, it's pretty much just an RPG shooter. You run around, level up, kill things, blow stuff up, boom. But they've added little quest lines that are mysteries here and there. They've added warlike quest lines, hunting quest lines, whatever. But the ones that were really innovative were the ones that were mysteries, such as the search for your son, um, the or even in Fallout 3, um, trying to figure out what the FEV virus was and all that, and in the Broken Steel DLC, and it was it was well added. Granted, it wasn't like a super mystery. You just really followed the waypoint and got to your point. But if you read the information that was given to you, you could actually piece together the story that happened prior to the Great War.
mm,
And I think that's what kind of mystery aspect is nice, is like, don't just throw it out there and say, oh well, here you go, this is what's going to happen, this is how it happened, here you go, all the information you need is right here. No, rather piece these puzzles together and infer what happens, create the mystery.
mm,
And the biggest series that I can find that does that are the Dark Souls and Bloodborne series. Because yeah, there's a little bit of campaign story to it. There's a little bit of lore they give you throughout the game, but you really have to piece the lore together based on prior games and what you read and what is shown throughout the game in order to get the full story of what's happening and what's going on and what will happen in future games.
mm. Now, for me, that like figuring out that kind of stuff is pretty cool and all, but for me, it's more about let's say we go into a modern setting. Like I want to be able to, like, let's say I have VR set up. I'm standing up right now so I can properly, emulate this. And let's say I need to go from, uh, like I show up. I'm basically I'm emulating a detective. It's me and like four other dudes are trying to emulate detectives here,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all competing to see who it is that can figure out the mystery first. And let's say one of us is Perry Mason, for example. He's a lawyer, from way back in the day, and the resources that he had that make him unique were that he had a detective that he had hired in order to, you know, basically follow people for him, figure things out. He also had a secretary, and he had these people to, discuss things with and bounce things off with. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we do like, make a game like this one day, I'd like to, be able to have the resources for these guys. Like, Dead by Daylight, right? It's where it's all
Oh
based
yeah.
on like actual IPs and everything. Like, I would like to do the same thing with a mystery game to where you could play as Poirot, to where you could play as what's his name, Matlock. You could play as all the different, versions. Yes, right, right.
I could just picture it. 75, 80-year-old Andy Griffith. I'm going to accuse you.
Yeah, exactly. And like the way he is that he acts like he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's able to lull them in the false sense of security as you are doing all of this. I mean,
Mhm.
everything will like it won't exactly be open world. You'll have access to the crime scene, you'll have access to witnesses, and as time goes by, like let's say we can make this into a 40-minute game, to where as time goes by, like time will fast forward over time, and like everybody will have like like couple minutes to inspect the crime scene, and then there's the interview stage, and then examining evidence, and then more interviewing. And as time goes by, you can choose like after like several minutes that particular stage is over, you can choose what you want to do with your next stage. You can, if you have other player characters there with you, you can tell them, okay, I want you to do this and I want you to do this. And like for example, with Perry Mason, he can tell, okay, I want you to follow this particular character. And if you're Sherlock Holmes, you can look and you will see all this different information. And it will tell you, like, it'll even give you like statistics on, okay, this person's like this person's like this, and he'll even have what's his name, Watson, with him. So
Mhm.
he could, Watson would give him like some insights here and there, and like someone to bounce ideas off of. And then, for example, um, someone like, for example, Batman. Let's say we include Batman as DLC later on, just for fun. He'll actually be able to run his own forensics, and like depending on, like, if you're a cop, you have access to a forensics lab, and like having all of these, different things, and like an introspection kind of perk, forensics perk, sharp mind perk, and deduction will even be a perk. In fact, at one point, like, it would be good if you could actually make your own detective and play the game like that. I mean, doesn't that sound
Mhm.
awesome?
It does sound pretty good. I could see it happening as like a Telltale game. As far as a full-fledged mystery game that whether it be like the Hitman game where it's episodic, it comes out. Each mission is a new chapter. You could buy it in pieces, or you could buy a season pass to where you get it for that season. Which is what I like about Hitman. Granted, yeah, once you've played the 6, 7 missions that come out with it, whatever, you've kind of finished it. You're done. There's nothing else to do other than when monthly
Well,
contracts come up.
well,
But
that's why I say,
season two, instead of releasing a brand new game, they're just going to come out two and release more episodes to download to that game. It's a what would you call it? Like a living game, kind of like MMOs are, where you just buy the expansions and continue from there. And the expansions could come out for years to come. Uh, However, with a mystery game like that, like you just said, where you can get other characters to play as and stuff like that. Maybe rather than do that, maybe just have it world of investigation or something like that. And it gives you a few missions where you play as certain detectives or whatever from your favorite genres of movies, books, cartoons, whatever. And you, based off that, you may get a season that is strictly Batman. So you get a full season where you run Batman detective stuff, where you're trying to investigate where the Joker disappeared to or whatever, or how Black Mask has killed certain people, whatever. But then you come back for like season 2 or something like that, and it's Sherlock Holmes. So you're running around 19th century London trying to figure out what's going on there.
Mm, well,
Other things like that.
well, you see, my thing for it is that making it to where it's episodes will make it to where it's more difficult to like properly emulate it. Like as soon as you're done with it, you're done. I mean that would just end everything. For me, what I want to do is that's the reason why I want it to be procedural, to where there would be all these different aspects around the killer. Like it would show the killer going in a certain way. Like it would actually be in the programming itself, to where it actually have to show the killer going in and killing the person and then going back out, like how they get out of there, or how they set them up to die and all that. And like it'll even be able to generate the different things here and there, and like there can even be red herring clues. I mean, whenever you're reading a mystery novel or you're watching a mystery TV program, everything you see usually is pointing towards somebody. And like for example, I don't know if you remember, if you ever watched Star Trek: The Next Generation, but there was an
Mhm.
episode where Data actually was trying to do a Sherlock Holmes thing, and like he immediately said, "Oh, it was the old lady with the pearl necklace, because it simulates, it looks like fingers, but it was actually her." And thing is like what Geordie LaForge said was that it ruins the experience. I want to avoid that, because you see, if you don't make it procedurally generated and randomize it enough with just a few misleading things here and there, it'll make it so that basically you would come in and you see one clue, and thing is, if the clue looks familiar, you know who did it. And by making it procedurally generated and with enough factors, you can make it to where there can't be spoilers. It will be impossible for spoilers to ruin the game for you. And that's the reason why I would like to see it
So
procedurally generated.
so not only procedurally generated, whereas every aspect is different every time you play it, because they're gonna change the way that they approach the scene, such as they
Hmm.
do with I can't
Like
really say the Hitman game did it,
roguelike,
because
like a roguelike
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, Hitman didn't really touch on that point. For some NPCs, yes, it did go completely randomized to where they don't follow a set path, but a lot of the NPCs and targets follow a set path, and all
Hmm.
you have to do is just figure out the pattern, and then you've got it. Um,
Like another
Now,
thing that I would like to see is, like, how some of them would have like a notepad you could write on, like and then you could actually have like a dossier that you can build on a certain character. Like, okay, this person, whenever they lie, whenever they do this, if you notice it, like for example, in LA Noir, you could see whenever like they were worried or something, or
mhm,
when they were happy when something happened, and like you could have it to where one character would automatically note this, but another character would have to manually note this down. Like for example, pointing, like putting your hand up to your notepad and clicking the trigger to write, that kind of thing. It's just a mechanic that I was thinking of. And then like one person will have like an eidetic memory to where they can remember everything. I
mhm,
think that's what eidetic means. Um,
I believe so.
yeah. So yeah, like being able to have everything like at your fingertips, just mentally versus having physical stuff. And like I think that being able to compete with somebody else, and then as soon as you understand who it is, you can make an accusation, and you would have to have the proof to back up that accusation, sure. But like there would be so many different ways you can get up enough proof together for the accusation, and then afterwards, like like the thing is like my problem with that particular system would be that some people, I guess, would try and force accusations like, okay, it was this person, and they were just guessing randomly, hoping they would win. There'd be too many trolls like that. So what I would actually include with it is a way to lose basically credit, or not credit, but credibility. There we go. Credibility. Like they lose credibility, and we can even have that be like a permanent system to where the less credibility a player has, the more often they just make baseless accusations, the less their credibility is, and so makes it less likely that their accusation will stick.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, if you have no proof and you accuse someone and you have no thought process, none of that other stuff, I think that accusations should not be able to be made at that point. That you would have to be able to have like a system for like a thought process. Okay, this is what everybody said, so this, and this, and basically you would have to like select them, depending on which detective you are. What are your thoughts on that?
Um. Well. Uh.
A lot of
I mean,
stuff, huh?
yeah, I think it's a good idea. I just think that doing something like that. I mean, it's not like it hasn't been done. In a mystery game aspect, it hasn't, but games have come and done things like that before, and there were always one or two things somewhere in there that were just complete major flaws, and it killed the
Yeah.
games.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's why I think they would have to have lots of testing involved, and you'd have to, look through different ways of balancing things, because game balance would have to be a like not exactly a priority, but
mhm.
a like something that you definitely try and focus on.
And see, that's like the thing I hate constantly mentioning Hitman, but it, it promised innovation. It promised complete customization on how you can approach a situation. And yes, it gives you thousands of different ways to enter the area, take out your target, get the
Mm,
hell out of there. It
mm,
gives you many different ways of doing it. The issue is whereas they went for the innovation of entering the buildings, etc., ways that you can get your kills, they sacrificed on AI. Whereas the AI is pretty much set on a path that they walk. Same thing for Assassin's Creed. The AI is set on a path they walk. You have hundreds of ways you can approach the situation, but no matter what, they're going to go the same exact direction until they notice you. Once they notice you, then there's kind of a little bit of adaptability in Flight and Survive, but it's only if you get noticed. If you stay undetected, which is the entire goal of the situation, if you stay undetected, then all of a sudden you're basically just following a pattern, memorizing it, and going from there. One game that tried to break that and did a pretty darn good job of breaking that part, but in essence, because it's a multiplayer game, just because you can approach the situation from any direction, your opponents can do the same. Siege, Rainbow Six Siege,
yeah.
it did a very phenomenal job. You can basically destroy anything in that entire map.
Except
To
for the unbreakable surfaces, of course.
Well, yeah, except unbreakable surfaces, unless you have a certain thing that you can do with it.
Yeah.
But most of those things, like you have just about any way you can enter that building, or they can defend in any way, whatever, and it's great. The only downside is something they didn't anticipate happening, and I guess once it happened, they just didn't care to fix it, or they think that it's arguably understandable enough, is when they first announced the game, they showed that you could be in a separate building to snipe in as a defender. Okay,
Spawn
I
peeking.
get that. Yeah. But the thing is like you just said, the actual terrorists or whatever defender team is doing have managed to find a way to utilize that as a way to spawn camp.
Yep.
And granted, in their defense, it helps their defensive tactical advantageousness. But the biggest issue they have with it is that, okay, granted, yeah, they know where you're coming from. They can shoot you if you get within their line of sights. That's fine. But here's the downside: is outside the map, if certain characters are out there, they are way overpowered. Inside the map, if certain characters are out there, they are way overpowered. But the thing that gets me the most is I don't believe, I I seriously don't believe that once people have started um fighting one another, that if a defender goes outside, he should automatically be tagged as being outside the building and have a marker over his head the entire time. I think that is the dumbest, stupidest mechanic incorporated into the game. Now, before people start dying in the game, I get that, because you've got your entire team outside their building reconning what's going on. I get that you'd be able to see a person standing outside the building no matter which side they were on. I get that. But if you want to get to the realism, which is what they claim to be, is the most realistic first-person shooter out, which they kind of are. But if you want to get to the trueness of realism, they need to make it to where once everybody on the attacking team is inside the building or has set foot in the building, or someone has started dying from either side, then if players go outside the map as defenders, if they go out into the open area, they should not be automatically marked or tagged. I think that is just a useless mechanic. And in some cases, the only way for you to get out of a situation is jump out of the window and get the hell out of Dodge.
Oh yeah, but you see, the way I see that particular thing is, let's say, you're sending in a team. They have people outside looking at the outside of the building, and they'll say, "Hey, there's somebody over here." You
True,
know.
true. But that's what the cameras are for.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you're talking about fixed cameras, that's what the defenders have. Like the attackers don't have that. All they have is drones.
Well, no, the attackers can use. See that's what gets me. Is you're right. The defenders do have the fixed cameras they can look at. But I'm going to tell you, in all honesty, in a real situation, if some police force is going to go in to a situation like that, and there's camera systems around, they're going to attempt to hack into those camera systems if they can. And at that point, they'll have access to those cameras too.
Well,
Now, if they can't,
it's more than
then,
just that.
yeah.
It's also so that the attackers are either the good guys or the bad guys. Like for example, the kidnapping victim. Usually, like whenever you're dealing with kidnapping, the guy that's like the people that are defending him are either the kidnappers or the people who are trying to save him from kidnappers. I mean, question is which. Like someone's the bad guy, but they always make that ambiguous. And
Yeah.
then there's the bombs. Like whenever you're dealing with the bombs, it's always the people that are defending are the bad guys. The people that are attacking are the good guys because they're defusing bombs. So, there's that.
Well, one thing I can suggest is take a note from Payday 2. Payday 2. Now, granted, if you play the ranked matches in Siege, you can choose where you're gonna start from and whatnot. Kinda get a little advantageousness from it based on where they're located instead of a random spawn and just casual mode.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing still is that with the size of the map, I get. Okay, is it 4v4 or 5v5?
It's 5v5.
5v5. Okay, I get 5v5. Map size is perfect for it. However, some of the maps are far more cluttered than others, and the cluttered ones tend to have less density to them, which is a weird way to say it. It's cluttered, but it's less dense. I I mean, like, for example, let's go with the airplane map. You have such a huge, wide open space to spawn from, and the terrorists can spawn camp you from any direction. But when you get inside the plane, it is so cluttered and dense inside that part of the map that it's easy for the attackers to find good cover and whatnot. But
Hmm.
on the outside, approaching it, granted, I realize in a realistic situation, if you're inside a plane, you're on a runway. It's wide open spaces.
Hmm.
However, the way that they have it set up is it's just there needs to be something done about it. Um, Even just adding a system for spawning in, such as coming in by helicopter, riding in by truck or something like that, and just getting up to where you're going to start infiltrating from.
Hmm.
Because doing the whole spawn, you drop down, run up, rappel up the wall, whatever, it, it leaves you open for too
Yeah,
long of a
basically
period of
it's
time.
limited entrance and limited exit. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
makes it so that the defenders have a bit more of a
yeah. Like
advantage.
even adding a helicopter timer. You have this long to exfiltrate the um target or whatever before the helicopter comes in, and then that person has to get that person to the helicopter, not
Yeah,
just.
currently the way it is that you just have to get them outside the window and that's about it. Right
Yeah,
there, it's extracted.
yeah.
So a lot of people, just
That's
rush
not
it
enough.
and they
Yeah,
just all rush in. One person grabs them and runs away.
but see, even in the hostage situation, there could be an enemy helicopter, a freaking terrorist chopper coming down, and they extract out by that. But there just needs to be a little bit more, and it's.
Well, that's the thing. They're already so focused on balancing the operators against each
Oh
other. They're not
God,
going to
they
even
need to
worry
do
about
that.
something like
They
that.
definitely need to do that.
Right now, Ella's gun is like really overpowered. But to get back on subject, thing is for me, I really have always enjoyed you know like procedural generation is like my it's so important to me that something be properly randomly generated. That way, you can do all kinds of things. For example, you know, let's say you actually can act as the killer. Like you can set up your own personal, you know, scenarios to where basically you have, okay, it was the butler. He used this particular moment to access the guy's tea and then poisoned it, but no one knew he was there. And he got away, but somebody noticed, there was a figure over there, and like, it can take in, different things from afar. You can explore the house, like the different houses and everything. Like we can even have like physical maps that you can like, just walk through as you're looking for things, and like it can be part of the whole crime scene. And you can like certain characters can memorize the layout of the area and try and put together, using spatial recognition, exactly how someone could have gotten to that particular T and like the different methods that someone would be able to use, and then different ways to disqualify. Let's say the maid, also had access to it, but he would know that she didn't do it because she was in town or something, at a gathering, or even he could put her as a suspect because she didn't have access to it, but the butler had lost the key, and it turns out that she did it, and like could even be just an assassination attempt because the person was looking into something that they shouldn't have been looking into as far as how the um, killer feels about it, or they were hired to do it, and it's a professional job, and it all looks really professional, and that points them to a particular suspect.
Hmm.
And in order to, if it's a professional kill, you need basically like stuff like people who have federal supplies, but logistics, to where they have access to databases and stuff. They can actually have a bit more of an edge versus that kind of killer. And then the other kind of killer, let's say it's just a serial killer, they would also have a bit of an edge, but then again, not much more of an edge than the guys who do not have that kind of resource. And like that's just my idea for a VR version of the game. And
Hmm.
okay, and then now let's move on to characters. Like what kind of mystery type characters have you always seen as kind of like someone that you would like to play as? Like for me, I would love to play as someone like, for example, um, what's his name, Mr. Magoo. Like I would like him to be able to investigate this thing and have his luck turned up to maximum, or Inspector Gadget, or the guy from
Well,
Pink Panther.
yeah, like Jacques Clouseau.
Yeah, Jacques
That's the one.
Cousteau, right there.
Yeah, but
Like, could you imagine?
I could see like a comedy one, but also for like a serious one, like playing like maybe I don't know, trying to think of some serious ones other than like Sherlock Holmes, etc. The obvious ones.
Well, there's also that Rex guy. Hold on, what's his name? Basically, this fat dude that never leaves his house, and he sends people out to talk to people for him. And sometimes he's actually at the place whenever it happens, and from there he puts things together. He's like a party guest or something.
Yeah.
But most of it is he basically sends bots out to bring him information, and then from there he gets everyone together and says, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And like, actually, you know what? You could have it to where as a phase, like let's say we separate it into phases. You'd have it as a phase where you gather all of the usual suspects. In fact, you can even be given like a list of possible suspects. And like like for example, if no one's on, like if the actual killer's not on there yet, you could still bring everyone together and maybe try and figure out who else could possibly have done it. And once your suspect list has grown to include the killer, then people can maybe start acting differently or something like that. Like, for example, the killer can start trying to silence a witness that saw something, and then from there you have to remember what they said to you. And
Hmm.
like, someone can be killing off more and more witnesses as time goes by. Like, it won't just be one murder. Like, it could be a series of murders. In fact, like we could even have it to where there's going to be like an event kind of thing, to where everybody, that is playing the game, they can all band together to try and figure out who it is that did this. And like it's going to be a mystery where there's hundreds of suspects in a city of thousands of people. Like make it that kind of thing, like a community event kind of thing, of a higher level, a higher degree. Something that could be designed to happen like once a month, and you could spend like a full week doing it,
Hmm.
and interviewing people, putting notes together, and then at the end of the week, everybody offers up, okay, I think it was this person, I was thinking it was this person. You can even do like accusations with the cops there, and then
Hmm.
you like if you do it right, like one of the things I liked about Perry Mason is that he always got the bad guy to confess, always, and that's something that I would like to see. Like, for example, let's say you are able to say, okay, it was you, but why did you do it? And there's like, it's because the guy wasn't showing me enough love, or oh, he was distracted by this, or he owed me money, or he treated me badly. If you can like empathize with them, kind of like Perry Mason does, he can get them to, like he can see exactly what buttons to press to get them to confess, because that's usually how he wins. Like that could be his like ultimate passive, is that people feel like confessing to him, but that would actually have to be in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for different characters, like for example Perry Mason, he could have it to where accusations are made in the courtroom. Sherlock Holmes, he can make accusations anywhere. Poirot, he can make accusations in person. It doesn't have to be at the courtroom, but usually he brings tons of people together so they can all act as witnesses to that person, being the person that's guilty, right?
Yeah.
So, that's just my thoughts on it. Now, how would you, like put the phases together? Like what would you do differently from what I just suggested?
Um, I don't know. I really like the ideas that you've just pitched. Um, you have to remind me who Perry Mason. That name is very familiar.
Well, the thing is, Perry
It's
Mason
not ringing a
is
bell.
basically back in like the 50s or 60s or something like that, back when it was black and white TV. He was this dude that was a lawyer who would always be on the side of good, and every time he took a client, they were innocent. Like he would be defending a client. In fact, that could probably play into, who did what. And in fact, that could even be part of it. That part of his ability is that he only represents the innocent. So that the person that you're defending is innocent. Like you can know that.
Yeah.
And like he even has like a detective who has his own set of skills. Like we could have like the amount of like characters out there is huge. And like there would be all kinds of people interested in running Hercule Poirot, through a mystery. Just watch how he does things and everything. And in fact, like the guy who plays Hercule Poirot just finished. Like he is the definitive Hercule Poirot. He just finished
Hmm.
his last season of it, I think, like last year. And so basically, like it's been a series that was running for years and years. And then there's also Matlock, and then there's Gumbo, and then there's I think Gumbo is his name. You could even have like a DLC for NCIS, to where you're playing as I don't know about Gibbs, because Gibbs I think would be more of like a
And
random person.
you
You could
could
do it
do
as like a team thing.
CSI and do
Yeah, CSI.
Grissom.
Yeah, and then you could also do Hawaii Five O. Well, Hawaii Five O would be more action oriented and stuff. I guess that could be an option possibly. But yeah, like you could be like on one of these teams, for a team version of the game, maybe to where it's you and several other guys, using your own different things, and then doing presentations. Okay, it was this person, this person, this person, and Hawaii Five O has their magic table. NCIS has their TV with the click remote, the clicker
Hmm.
remote, and they pass it around. And sometimes they click the wrong button. It has one of Gibbs' ex-wives. Oops, how'd that get there? To
Hmm.
try and derail them. And oh, by the way, like I think one of my favorite NCIS episode I've seen so far is the one where Jimmy Palmer, saves that kid on the ledge. I don't know if you saw that one yet.
Mm-mm.
Oh, it is really good. It basically is like a recap episode, but it turns out that well, I won't spoil it for you. I'll just send you the episode number and you can watch it on Netflix or something. But yeah,
Okay.
like it's a really good episode. I really enjoyed it. Uh, Also, um, there's like NCIS. There's like the whole Law and Order SVU team that you could throw into it as well. All different kinds of DLCs and stuff that you could use. In fact, these companies would actually have like an additional source of revenue, and it would actually increase people's interest in these shows, right? Like make
Hmm.
it to where people watch these shows more often, so there would be like an added incentive there too. So this right here could make a lot of money. Like just that by itself should be enough to convince some company somewhere to be like, you know what, he's right. Let's start making it.
Yeah.
And that I'm just talking about a business standpoint here. Like, what kind of intellectual property would you like to introduce?
Uh, I think Fox would have the most as far as detective things go. Like just a
Mm,
bunch of Fox characters. Because you get your CSI and all that stuff. I think Fox is the channel that runs all those.
mm. Well, another one that I think would actually be good. I don't know if you ever heard of it. You ever heard of librarians?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's the librarians. Thing is, like, there was this series of miniature movies back in the day. Had this one actor, I can't remember what his name is right now, but it was the librarians, and he was the librarian. He became the librarian, and over time, uh, like they kept trying to make more sequels. And the original, guy who was like the guy who wanted to do the whole thing, he died. Like
Mm-hmm.
he was basically known as Kingsley or something like that. He was
Yeah.
basically the first librarian. He was considered immortal and everything. And
Oh, the sci-fi show from Sci-Fi Channel.
yes, yes,
Okay. Uh, wasn't it like Warehouse 13 or something like that?
it was similar to Warehouse 13. Warehouse 13 was actually, I think, a copy of the library. I think that I personally feel that way, and it was connected to the Eureka universe, which was, I loved Eureka. I just wish it never had to end. Like if they hadn't done so much time traveling to alter things, people would have
Yeah.
been more interested in the show, and it wouldn't have dropped so much. Because it's a bold move, sure, but you kill like the connection to the old characters that way by
Yeah.
doing small changes like that with time travel. What they should have done was they should have, done time travel, made it to where only one thing changed and everybody else is the same, and then use something like that artifact to, all of a sudden everybody's different, changing them from that point on. Curing, the kid's autism, and, suddenly he's able to do things now instead of making it because time travel. Because that right there is a bit of a cop out to me personally.
Yeah.
But it was a really good series, and like it was connected to Warehouse 13, and Warehouse 13, it was also a good series. Like both those series were really good, and Warehouse 13 didn't do as many missteps as Eureka did, but it also had to end. But the Librarians though, such a good series. I can see myself watching it for years and years to come. And for me, I just oh man, so much fun watching, especially with the guy from Leverage. I can't remember what his name is right now. He's basically the Texan guy that is one of the librarians now, and like he can kind of fight sometimes, but mostly he's like a history buff kind of guy, like really smart with history.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was pretty funny. And yeah, like that series, like the Librarians, I think could actually transfer rather well into the VR series. Like if we use the same ideas that we're having, for playing these mystery games, if we applied that to the Librarians, that right there, I think would be a really good way to go about it, personally. But yeah. Anyway, let's just break it down now. Ideals that you would like to see in a mystery game? Like, what is it that you've not seen that you've wanted to see when you have played this game before? This kind of genre before.
Um. Well, something I like about it's kind of morbid, but something I like about the Sherlock Holmes games is the autopsies.
Mm.
I think that's kind of like an interesting aspect to
Oh
put
yeah,
into a
that would
mystery
definitely
game.
work good. That would definitely work good. If there's an autopsy, and in fact, you like, let's say Sherlock Holmes is involved, he has like like medical degree type information in his head, so he could tell stuff from that. And then NCIS, let's say we include NCIS, they'll have Ducky, that he'll be able to tell you all different kinds of things about it, especially since they gave him those analyst type skills as well, right? So he'll be able to say, oh,
Yeah.
you're looking for this kind of person. They do this, they do this, they do this. Give you like little tidbits of information. Like there would be some people who could actually benefit from that. And Ducky would give you an enhanced autopsy. Being a detective would give you a regular autopsy, and someone to tell you different like small things, and then getting a public version of the autopsy, you wouldn't get as much. In fact,
Hmm.
one thing that would actually be pretty cool to do with this particular system is supernatural. Like that, wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, so you'd basically be inspecting to figure out who the monster is, and man. Anyway, yeah, I believe I'm gonna wrap it up for this particular episode of the podcast, and thank you ever so much for being my guest today, and
No problem.
I hope to see you again soon.
No problem, bud. Anytime.
All right, that's it for today, and I'll see y'all next time.